You think her silence means she's moved on. But silence is the loudest thing a woman who regrets you can produce. Let that land for a second. You've been watching your phone. Maybe not every minute, but enough. Enough to notice when her name isn't there. Enough to feel the weight of a notification that never comes. And somewhere in that waiting, you started to tell yourself a story. You told yourself she's fine. You told yourself she's probably happier. You told yourself that whatever you two had meant more to you than it ever meant to her. And that story, that quiet, devastating story, has been running in the background of your life like a virus you can't quite find or fix. I'm here to tell you that story is wrong. Not slightly off, not a little distorted, wrong. And the reason it feels so convincing is because nobody sat you down and told you what regret actually looks like in a woman who lost someone she should have kept. Nobody explained the signals. Nobody decoded the behavior. And so you've been reading a language you were never taught. That changes today. If this kind of content, the real stuff, the uncomfortable stuff, the stuff that actually moves the needle in your life, if that's what you need right now, then make sure you're subscribed. Not for me, for you. Because the version of you that keeps operating without this clarity is the version that keeps losing. You need these reminders. You need someone in your corner who isn't going to soften the truth until it loses its teeth. Subscribe and stay close. Now let's get into it. Here's what it really means when she starts coming back around after losing you. Here's what it means when the texts reappear, when she likes a post after months of nothing, when she calls at an inconvenient hour with a question she could have answered herself. Here's what's actually happening beneath the performance of casual reconnection. It means she took you for granted. It means the reality of your absence hit her in a way she didn't predict. And it means she is now trying to reopen a door that she herself chose to close, without doing the work that would justify it being opened. That is the thesis. That is the through line. Everything else we're going to talk about today builds on that foundation. Let's start with the misconception, because you're probably living inside it right now. The misconception is that if she comes back, it means she loves you, that her return is proof of her feelings, that the regret equals growth, that the reaching out equals readiness, that the soft text at midnight is some kind of emotional breakthrough. You see the behavior and you interpret it through the lens of what you want it to mean, which is that she finally gets it. She finally sees you. She finally understands what she had. And here's the hard truth. Regret is not the same as change. Longing is not the same as love. Missing someone is not the same as being ready to treat them the way they deserve to be treated. These things get confused constantly, and the confusion costs men years of their lives. It costs you energy. It costs you momentum. It costs you the forward motion you were building the moment she left the picture. Because when she comes back with her regret and her soft signals, what you feel is hope. And hope, when it's misdirected, is one of the most expensive emotions a man can carry. Let me explain why this happens. Let me give you the root cause. When a woman loses a high-value man, and by high value, I don't mean rich, I don't mean famous, I mean a man who is grounded, purposeful, self-respecting, a man who has standards and lives by them. When she loses that man, the loss doesn't always register immediately. In the moment of the breakup or the drift or the distance, she may feel relief. She may feel freedom. She may have convinced herself that she needed space or needed something different or needed someone who made her feel a certain kind of excitement that felt missing from what you two had. But then reality begins its work. Reality is not theatrical. It doesn't announce itself. It just accumulates. It accumulates in the form of the new guy who doesn't listen the way you listened. It accumulates in the form of nights that feel emptier than she expected. It accumulates in the comparison she swore she wouldn't make. She didn't mean to compare. She told herself she was done comparing. But then something happens, a moment, a feeling, a conversation, and without meaning to, she measures it against what she had with you. And what she had with you wins. That's when the regret sets in. And regret, for a woman who still has pride, doesn't look like an apology. Regret looks like behavior. She starts acting like this. She finds reasons to reach out about things that don't require reaching out. A meme, a memory, a question about something that hasn't mattered in months. On the surface, it looks like nothing. It looks casual. It looks low stakes. That's by design. She is testing the waters without admitting she's testing the waters. She is checking whether the door is still open without asking whether the door is still open. That way, if you respond warmly, she has an opening. And if you don't respond at all, she can retreat with her dignity intact and tell herself she was just being friendly. That's called controlled vulnerability, and you need to recognize it for what it is. She starts showing up in your digital space. A like on a photo that's 2 weeks old, a view on a story she would have scrolled past before, a comment that's just slightly more than neutral, not flirtatious enough to be obvious, but warm enough to be intentional. She is orbiting. She is staying close enough to the flame to feel its heat without committing to stepping into the light. And she's waiting to see what you do with that proximity. She is watching your response, not just to her actions, but to her absence. She is measuring whether you've maintained your posture or whether you've collapsed. Because here's what she knows, even if she's never said it out loud. She knows that a man who crumbled after losing her is not the man she's regretting. The man she's regretting is the man who didn't crumble, the man who kept going, the man who woke up every morning and built something even when it hurt. That man is the source of the regret. And the only way to confirm that man still exists is to check on him without checking on him, to reach out without really reaching out. You follow me? She starts talking to your friends. Casual, easy. She makes it seem like she's just staying connected to people she cares about, but she's gathering information. She wants to know if you're okay. She wants to know if you've moved on. She wants to know if someone new is in your life. And she wants to know how she feels about that answer before she consciously admits she's asking the question. She is running reconnaissance on a life she voluntarily stepped out of, and she is doing it with the grace of someone who has convinced themselves they're just being sociable. She starts referencing the past. A shared memory surfaces in conversation. An inside joke that only makes sense between the two of you. She brings it up softly, like it's nothing, like it just occurred to her, like nostalgia hit her out of nowhere. But nostalgia doesn't arrive without a reason. Memory doesn't surface randomly. When she says, "Remember when she goes back to something you built together, she is holding that thing up to the light. She is reminding both of you that there was something worth remembering. She is saying, without saying it, that what you had value. And she is watching your face, or your response, to see if you still agree. She starts improving. She posts more. She looks better. She's at the gym. She's out with friends. She seems lighter, more alive, more present. And every part of that is curated. Not entirely. Some of it is genuine because regret does push people to move. But the presentation of it is for an audience. You are the audience. She wants you to see what she's doing. She wants you to feel something when you see it. She wants you to notice the upgrade and wonder if you're the reason for it. And the honest answer is, you probably are. Not because she's doing it to manipulate you, but because your absence created a vacuum and she is trying to fill it with visible momentum, partly to convince herself, partly to signal to you that she is not who she was when you left. She becomes available in ways she wasn't before. Suddenly, her schedule has flexibility. Suddenly, she's interested in things you used to talk about. Suddenly, the walls are lower and the tone is warmer and the distance feels thinner. This is not accidental. This is her unconsciously, or sometimes very consciously, lowering the drawbridge. She is creating conditions for a conversation to happen naturally. She is engineering organic reconnection, because direct reconnection requires too much exposure and too much accountability. Now, here's what this costs you if you misread it. If you see all of this and interpret it as her being ready, truly ready, deeply changed, genuinely different, you will rush back into a dynamic that hasn't changed at its root. You will reopen the relationship on her terms, at her timeline, for her emotional comfort. And you will do it at the cost of everything you built in her absence. The clarity, the standards, the new version of yourself that started forming the moment she left. You will trade all of that for the feeling of her approval, and 6 months from now, you will be right back where you started. Only this time, the damage will be deeper because you will have proof that you already knew better. That's the cost. That is exactly the cost. So let's talk about the reframe. Let's talk about what you're supposed to do with this information. Let's talk about the man who gets this right. Picture him. Picture the man who understands exactly what's happening when she comes back around. He is not cold. He is not bitter. He is not running some kind of revenge strategy or playing games designed to inflict pain. That is not who this man is. He is warm, but he is not available. He is open, but he is not desperate. He is present to the moment, but he is not moved by nostalgia alone. He has standards, not as a performance, not as a wall, but as a lived reality. His standards are baked into how he spends his time, who he gives his energy to, and what he requires before he opens the door to something that hurt him. This man has a life that he returned to. When the relationship ended, or when the distance grew, he didn't pause his story. He didn't sit in amber waiting for things to go back to how they were. He redirected. He poured himself into work or craft or fitness or family or purpose. And in the pouring, something happened. He grew. He built. He became more of what he already was before she arrived in the story. And now, with some distance, she can see it clearly. She can see what she was next to. She can see what she had access to. And she can feel with uncomfortable precision what it means to no longer have access to it. This man does not chase, not because he has been told not to chase, but because he genuinely has better things to do with his energy. He understands that his attention is a resource. His presence is a privilege. His time is finite and irreplaceable, and it belongs, first and finally, to his own becoming. When she reaches out, he is not rearranging his world to respond in 4 seconds. Not because he's playing a game. Games are for people who are still operating from insecurity, but because he actually has things going on. He actually has momentum, and he's not going to disrupt that momentum for a text that doesn't deserve disruption. This man is honest with himself. He is honest about what the relationship was. He is honest about the patterns that existed. He doesn't rewrite history through the warm filter of her return. He remembers clearly, not bitterly, but clearly, how things actually went. He remembers the moments his standards were ignored. He remembers the moments he felt undervalued. He remembers the specific ways in which what he gave was not matched. And he holds that memory not as a weapon, but as a data point, as information about what he requires to be different, if anything is going to be different. This man knows the difference between forgiveness and reinstatement. He can forgive. He is big enough to forgive. He knows that holding resentment is a tax on himself, not on her, and he refuses to pay that tax. But forgiveness does not mean the removal of standards. It does not mean starting from scratch as though nothing happened. It does not mean pretending that the past is not relevant to the future. Forgiveness is an internal act. Reinstatement is a negotiation, and no negotiation begins without accountability. This man requires accountability, not as punishment, as proof, because words are the cheapest currency available, and he has learned in ways that cost him something real, not to invest in cheap currency. If she wants back in, she has to demonstrate, not describe. She has to show, not promise. She has to earn, over time, through consistent behavior, what was previously available to her. Not because he's withholding out of cruelty, but because that is what respect looks like. That is what real love, real partnership, real worthiness looks like when you've been through something and you want to do it better. You want to be that man. I know you do. And the reason it feels hard right now is not because you don't have the capacity. It's because you are still operating from the emotional state you were in when she left, not from the elevated state you have been quietly building ever since. The work you've done on yourself since she left, the gym sessions, the long walks, the journal entries you'd never show anyone, the conversations with the people who know you best, the nights you chose yourself when you could have chosen distraction. All of that work has been building something in you. The problem is that her reappearance is activating the old software, the version of you that needed her validation, the version of you that measured your worth by her presence. And that software is outdated. It no longer reflects who you are. It's time to run the update. So here is exactly what you do. Here is the sequence. Follow this. You stop performing indifference and start practicing presence. Stop pretending you don't feel what you feel. Stop showing up to your own life as half a man because you're using the other half to manage your feelings about her. Acknowledge what you feel. Sit in it for as long as it requires, and then get up and redirect. The feelings are real. The meaning you assign them is a choice. Choose meaning that serves your forward motion, not your backward pull. You stop making yourself available at her convenience. The midnight text gets a morning reply, if it gets a reply at all. The casual Instagram engagement gets nothing but your continued existence as a man who is busy doing something meaningful. You are not a vending machine dispensing emotional availability on demand. You are a person with a life and a direction and a set of priorities, and she is not automatically at the top of that list simply because she has decided to be interested again. You stop auditing your worth through her lens. Stop measuring whether you're doing well based on whether she's noticed. Stop letting the upgrade you're living be secretly for her. Do it for you, train for you, create for you, build for you. The moment your growth becomes contingent on her approval, you've already handed over the most important thing you've reclaimed since she left. Do not trade your sovereignty for her attention. You start having the honest conversation with yourself about what you actually want, not what you want in the abstract, not what would feel good in the moment if the moment went perfectly. What do you actually want in a partnership? What do you require? What are you no longer willing to tolerate? What does a relationship need to look like for you to feel valued, respected, and genuinely met? Write it down if you have to. Make it specific. Because when and if she wants a real conversation, you need to arrive at that conversation as a man who knows himself, not as a man who is so relieved she's back that he agrees to anything just to reduce the discomfort of her absence. You start enforcing your standards with your behavior, not your words. Don't tell her what you require. Show her what happens when requirements aren't met. If she reaches out casually and you respond casually, she learns that casual access is available. If she reaches out and you take your time, stay in your lane, remain grounded in what you're building, she learns something different. She learns that access to you is earned. She learns that you are the kind of man who has other things to attend to. And that is not a lesson delivered through a speech. It's a lesson delivered through how you actually live your life in her presence and in her absence. You start being honest with her if and when the conversation becomes real, not harsh, not rehearsed, honest. If she wants to talk, you talk from clarity. You don't perform anger and you don't perform indifference. You speak from a place of knowing what you experienced and knowing what you require. You tell her that what happened had a cost. You tell her that what you're willing to build going forward looks different from what existed before. And then you listen, not for the answer you want, but for the truth of who she actually is right now, and whether that truth matches what you need. Because you are not looking for the feeling of being chosen. You are looking for the reality of being valued. Those two things are not the same. You stop confusing her comfort with your healing. This is important. When she comes back, part of what you'll feel is the urge to make her comfortable, to ease her awkwardness, to smooth the re-entry so that neither of you has to sit in the difficulty of what happened. Resist that, not to punish her, but because the difficulty is informative. The way she handles accountability, the way she sits with discomfort, the way she shows up when the conversation isn't easy. That tells you everything you need to know about whether she has grown or whether she has simply grown lonely. Let her be uncomfortable. Growth lives in discomfort. If she's serious, she'll stay in it. Now let's talk about the final piece. Let's talk about you, not her, not the relationship, not the question of whether she'll come back or stay or prove herself or grow. Let's talk about you and who you are when you strip away the narrative of this particular loss. You are not diminished by her leaving. You are not defined by her return. You are not a story that depends on her character arc to find its meaning. You are the main character of your own life. And that life, your life, has been unfolding with or without her presence in it. Every hard morning, every moment of discipline when you didn't feel like it, every time you chose the slightly harder and slightly more honest path when the easier path was right there. That is the accumulation of a man who is worth something. That is the foundation of the self-respect that she is now, in her own way, acknowledging. Her regret is not the verdict. It is evidence. Evidence that what you had was real. Evidence that how you showed up mattered. Evidence that a man who knows himself, who respects himself, who lives according to standards that don't shift based on who's watching, that man leaves a mark. Not a dramatic, explosive mark. A quiet, undeniable one. The kind that registers only when it's no longer there. You have always been the answer, not the answer to her question. Her question is hers to figure out, but the answer to yours. The answer to the question of what kind of man you are when things get hard. The answer to the question of whether you can lose something significant and still come out of it with more than you went in. The answer to the question of whether your worth is conditional on her choice or whether it exists independent of it. It exists independent of it. Let me say that again because you need to hear it more than once. Your worth exists independent of her choice. It existed before she chose you. It existed while she had doubts. It exists now while she regrets. And it will exist long after this chapter has found its conclusion, whatever that conclusion turns out to be. You don't need her validation to confirm what you already know. You already know who you are. You already know what you bring. You already know the quality of presence you offer when you're fully in something, fully committed, fully showing up for another person. That knowledge belongs to you. No exit, no silence, no regret tour takes that from you. So stand in it. Stand in what you know about yourself. Stand in the standards you've set. Stand in the growth you've built in the silence she created. Let her actions tell you who she is right now. Let your standards tell her who you are. And let the outcome, whatever it is, come from truth rather than longing. That is the only version of this story that you can live with. Not the version where you chased because you were afraid of losing. The version where you remained who you were and let the right thing find its way to you. That is the man you are becoming. Maybe you're not fully there yet. That's fine. Becoming is the work. Becoming is the point. Every day that you choose yourself, every day that you redirect instead of relapse, every day that you hold the standard when it would be easier to drop it, you are becoming more of that man, more grounded, more certain, more worth regretting. Because here's the irony. The men that women regret most are the men who didn't need her regret to keep going. They kept going anyway. They kept building. They kept becoming. And her regret, when it arrived, found a man who had become more than she remembered, more than she expected, more than she was prepared for. And that version of you is the destination, not a destination that exists to make her feel something, a destination that exists because it is the fullest expression of who you are when you take yourself seriously. Take yourself seriously. That is the entire message of everything I just said, compressed down to its core. Take yourself seriously. Take your standards seriously. Take your growth seriously. Take your time seriously. Take your peace seriously. When you do that, when you live that, not just understand it, but actually live it, the question of whether she regrets losing you becomes secondary. Because you have something that requires so much of your full attention that you can barely afford to spend too much time on the question. You have a life to build. Get back to it. And if you want to keep getting this kind of truth, the kind that doesn't comfort you into complacency, the kind that challenges you to show up better, the kind that treats you like the capable, serious person you actually are, then subscribe. Stay close. This channel exists for the men who are in the middle of the work, the ones who are serious, the ones who are willing to be uncomfortable in service of becoming who they're meant to be. You belong here. And there's a lot more where this came from. Let's keep going.